Hi, my name is Steve Martile, and welcome to another episode of the Meeting of the Masters. Let me introduce you to today's special guest. So Rhonda Bowen is a global strategic communication guide with over 30 years experience in communicating across cultures. As an American who has lived in Germany since 1983, she has worked with people from more than 70 countries. Her business, established in 1988, has brought insights and support to thousands of best professionals, business, engineering, science, and technology. Rhonda, welcome to the call.
Thank you so much, Steve. Nice to be with you today.
So I'm actually a recovering mechanical engineer.
Okay, excellent. Congratulations.
Yeah. So, and I haven't practiced engineer in years, but I want to ask you a bit more about the professionals you work with. But before we do that, just to give my audience a sense of who you are and your background, where were you, what happened, and who were you surrounded with that inspired you to do what you're doing today?
Well, this goes back a long way because I've been around the block a few times, but it goes back to when I was about 12 years old and I had a geography teacher named Miss Snyder. And Miss Snyder's fiance had died during World War I, and she was still teaching. This was back in the 70s. And she took every summer off, as most people in the US who teach take the summer off, and just traveled all over the world. And her museum, her classroom was like a museum. So every time we walked in, we started talking about a different country. She walked over to some cabinet and opened a door and pulled out something and showed it to us. And I was fascinated. And I was like 12 years old and I didn't know anything about the world. And I lived in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania, but I thought this was really cool. Then I was an exchange student during high school. And while I was away, who wrote a letter to my parents? Miss Snyder. To say that she'd seen in the newspaper that I had gone abroad and she was so happy for me. And ever since then, it's just been one more piece of the evolution after another. I've lived here in Germany now permanently since 1983, and I've had my own business here since 1988.
Okay, so I love traveling.
Yeah.
When I graduated university in Canada, engineering school, I was going to go on basically a road trip with a friend of mine. So let's go through the US and Canada. Let's just drive. He's like, that's boring. Let's go to Europe. And I was like, okay. I hadn't been through US really, and hadn't been through Europe. So I didn't really know what I was missing. But like reluctantly, I decided to go ahead and we went through like 10 countries in Europe. It was amazing. And that was like my first experience of traveling abroad. What would you say is what did you gain from traveling abroad? Like, what's the benefit of it?
A lot of people ask me when they meet me here for the first time, and I say I was here and I came over when I was younger, and they always say, oh, and what made you stay? What was his name? Well, it wasn't a man or a woman or anybody else. It wasn't
Right.
a person. It was the fact that where I was living in Germany at the time was so very different from where I grew up in the US. And that this fascination with having a totally different culture, with a different history, with a different way of living and a different perspective on life was so fascinating for me that I decided I wanted to come back. And then having gone to university for a year in Vienna and then studying and getting my master's degree back in the States, they sent me here to do a program. And after that, I said, you know what? I just don't ever want to go back to the US. I just love it here so much. And fortunately, I've met numbers of people who've gone whichever way around, from one country to another. It doesn't matter whether it's US to Europe or vice versa, who say they feel very much at home in the place which is not the place where they grew up. And I think that, people say, oh, Rhonda, you love pasta. I always say, yeah, in my last life, I must have been Italian, all these kinds of things. We don't know where it comes from, but the fascination of being somewhere else has always been wonderful for me. And as I said, having had the opportunity to work with people from more than 70 countries around the world, many of them in those countries, is just the one thing that really keeps me going. And now online, of course, we don't have to even go anywhere to meet and talk to all these people. Recently, I was talking to a colleague from Madagascar.
Awesome.
Lots of people wouldn't even know where Madagascar is, let alone talk to somebody who actually lives there. So I just am fascinated by the whole world and love the fact that being a cosmopolitan means you get to see things in a different way. And I always say my motto is to be fit. I'm not terribly physically fit. I'm not a sports person or anything, but I'm flexible, insightful, and tolerant. And that's what you get from being out in the world and meeting and working with so many different people and professionals from so many places.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. Great segue. It's what you said about being at home. I remember when I went to Switzerland, as soon as we got there, I was like, I just felt so comfortable there. And part of it might be because it's got a lot of the Canadian landscape, but like you said, it might be from a past life. I have no idea. I just felt like if there was somewhere where I was going to build a house in the future, that was one of the places I was like, I could live there. Right. And my wife and I went there 10 years later to Switzerland. And it was like, we really both felt at home there. It felt really like comfortable, even though we'd never been there before. Okay, cool. So what was your FIT acronym again? Because I thought that was great.
Flexible, insightful, and tolerant.
Tolerant. What do you mean by tolerant?
Well, if you work with people from 70 different countries, and if you look at all the things that are happening in the world nowadays with people being put in places where they don't want to be based on their race, based on their gender, based on their preferences and whatever, religion, all of those different things. The other day, someone said, "Oh, Rhonda, I just got a certification in DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion.
Right.
Do you have one?" I said, "I've worked with people from 70 countries. I don't think I need one." Having had all of that experience in real life over the last 30 plus years in my business tells me that I must be doing something right. Otherwise, that wouldn't have worked, number one. And I think doing things in real life with real people and helping them work on the things that they need to be work on, in my case, communication across cultures, is so much more valuable than just going someplace and learning about it. I'm a very practical person. I need to be in it. I need to be working with the people, and I need to see that they have something that comes out of it at the end that is really, really important for them. Yeah.
Talk to me about, you said something that kind of stuck out to me. I relate to it because of the work I did as an engineer. Some of the engineer work that I did was, I felt this when you said this. People are being put in places they don't want to be. What do you mean by that?
I find I work in lots of really big companies that produce huge machines or software as a service or things like that, where you ask people if they can communicate across cultures. And for me, that doesn't have anything to do with your passport necessarily or which country you live in. That's national culture. That's one thing. But I find the harder thing for people is organizational culture. So I don't know how many engineers I know and have worked with over the years who say, "Oh, those crazy people from the marketing department." So the cultural clash is not because it may be two people who grew up in the same town and work in the same company their whole lives. They don't get along. And why? Not because they don't like each other. It's just that their goals are different. The way they look at the world is different. The way they approach their work is different. And of course, they're part of a chain. All of these people have something to do within the company, which then affects clients and customers, but they do different things and they don't always get in alignment ahead of time. So I talk in my business about glass walls. Everybody talks about glass ceilings. You can't get anywhere. What if you can't even get to the people in the next department?
Right.
What if you can't have the handover from sales to engineering when you're producing big custom-made machines? What if the people who do the solution architecture in the software company can't then talk to the people who have to implement it together with the customer? So there are lots of people who are working someplace, and if they're in their own little silo or their own little department, that's great because all those people tick the same. But most of us now work in a matrix. And we're working online. So things have become more and more complicated. And if you don't sit down and figure out where the friction is and why doesn't it work, it becomes worse and worse. And so for me, communicating across cultures is not because I'm sitting in Germany at the moment and you're sitting in the US. The thing is that's really important is, what are we doing and what are we trying to achieve together? And if we aren't in alignment and we don't understand what's important to other people and we don't get the same messages out to the clients, my joke is the client speaks to 4 people in the organization and gets 10 different answers. Well, There has to be something that makes sure everybody is on the same page, and that the outcome, both for individuals in the company and for the client, is something that everybody can work with.
That's funny that you said that they talk to 4 different people and get 4 different answers.
Mhm.
I worked for a engineering firm. Globally, it was about 10,000, and it was I don't know how many engineers, probably half engineers, technologists, the whole gamut. 30% of the time that I worked there, I would spend, like we say, we have a project meeting, new kickoff meeting. There's say 4 or 5 people in there. Before we even talk to the client, I did an internal kickoff first. So we were talking about it. And so the engineers, the designer, they would ask questions and certain things. And I said, review the scope. And I think then we start talking about it. They would start to say things. And I was like, oh, they don't really get the bigger picture of why we're doing this, right? And so then I would explain how the client's process would work and how they profit from it and how it's a business. And so 30% of the time I would spend talking with these big picture things so that everyone was aligned. Like you said, now everyone understands why this has to be done in 6 weeks because they have a shutdown, or now everyone understands that, this part is probably more important than this part. And so everyone comes out of the meeting with a total different outlook, same skills, but totally different outlook. And then because of that, there's cohesion, right?
Exactly.
So it talks back to what you were saying about clients communicating through these glass walls.
Mhm.
What is it that you're doing with clients right now? I would think, I don't know for sure because I don't work in a big organization. What do you think is happened since COVID and online streaming and Zooming and all this stuff? Has it made alignment and this cohesion more aligned or less aligned?
When I look at it from the international perspective, if I talk about the software as a service company, for example, it's an American company, but I work with the people here in the German speaking world in Europe. So a lot of them were very, very upset when everything went online because they were very, if you use the old term, touchy-feely. I have to go and sit with my client in the same room at the same place to make sure that I understand. All the sales people I knew were just devastated because they couldn't go and talk to anybody anymore. And I was saying, but you talk to me online all the time. Yeah, but Rhonda, that's not the same. And I said, no, it's not the same. But the whole point is, where do you find the things that are positive in that? And look at how much time you're not spending in a car, for example, and being tired when you get there. Look at the ways that this thing that's happening called COVID or a pandemic is giving us new opportunities that we can really capitalize on if we have the right mindset about it. And if we don't just say, oh, I can't wait till I can go back and shake hands with Mr. Schmidt. Well, yeah, that's nice. But until then, we have to do other things, first of all. And second of all, maybe some of those other things are better for us than we think.
Yeah.
I find that most people I talk to, I do a lot of things with meetings and facilitation and negotiation and how you actually get to whatever it is you're trying to get to. One of my favorite sayings is say what you want to say to get what you want to get. And not only you, but you is everybody in the room, obviously. So when I say, if you don't spend all that time on the road and you actually sit down and you really focus for an hour or two, don't you see that some of the outcomes are coming to you better and faster because people are just sitting there concentrating on this one thing? Yeah, sometimes. And I said, okay, you just have to be open for that. And at the beginning, that was very hard because everybody was struggling with how do I learn the technology and what do I do and all of these things. And now I speak to many people who say, I don't want to go back to the office. I love this now. This is the way I want to work. And I think we've had this wonderful opportunity called COVID, which has given us a chance to reflect on how do we actually work? What is the thing that is really giving us the most benefit? And how much easier is it now to work with those people wherever they are in the world? Because it used to be, well, I have to get on an airplane and fly someplace and do whatever, which I did a lot of in the past. But I said, you know what? Now I'm getting a lot more things done and I'm having a bigger impact on more people because I'm not wasting a lot of time traveling around all over. So for me, I think it's important that we actually look at how are we overcoming those difficulties, but see how much good we're getting out of it. And I think
So
we just
good.
have to keep our focus on that. Huh?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I mean, I think that a lot of people's, like you said, a lot of people's perspective had changed around it. You know, I find fascinating is that there's definitely a skill to having a Zoom call versus a in-person conversation. But if there's one thing that's, it heightens your sensitivity to the conversation so that you can be more effective. And that's a skill, and it does take time. But you, like you said, now, you know, people have time to be quiet with themselves, or they get time to journal or other things. And I've talked to a few people who work full time at home, and I'm like, do you really work 40 hours a week? And the 2 or 3 people I've talked to said, no, they work less, but they get the same amount of work done. And I was like, okay, well, I see that. Right. Okay, cool. So let me ask you this. What is the most exciting project that's inspiring you right now that you're working on?
I'm working on something for me very new because I grew up in the offline world until a couple of years ago. I moved online before COVID, which was great. That helped a lot of people because I knew what was happening before the whole thing went crazy, and I could help lots of people doing that. But when I decided to move online, I had done a lot of things before where people had always said, Rhonda, I have this problem. Can you help me? And we sat down, we figured something out. And now being online is a very, very difficult thing for me personally, because I, for over 30 years, was walk in the room and shake people's hands or kiss them on the cheek or bow or, you know, whatever was appropriate, depending on where I was in the world. And always listening to what they were saying and trying to find a way to make something, either a program or a seminar or whatever it was, or have a nice meeting with a whole group of people to facilitate an agreement so that they could all get on the same page. And I thought to myself, how am I going to do this online? Because, of course, if I don't get to meet everybody ahead of time and spend all this time with them in person, how am I going to offer them something where they can choose the things that are best for them? And I'm in the process of setting up a system where people will be able to buy like a card, if you will, and it will have tokens or units on it. And then there will be like a menu. So if you bought something with 50 units and you looked at the menu and said, oh, I'm working on this presentation, but I don't know if it's really going to speak to my audience. You know, these aren't other engineers, these are other people, and I'm not sure if they'll really get it. I need to sit down with Rhonda for some time and just go through it and check and see if she has any insights for me. And if you do that, that costs X amount of units. I'm still getting all the details figured out, but people will be able to come to me without having had lots and lots of all kinds of meetings and things, figuring things out. They can just come in, have this option to use these units, and then call them up when they need them. Because I think one of the things that COVID has taught us, these things about, we used to always meet every Monday at 10 o'clock for coffee. Well, that doesn't always work anymore. And a lot of people need things much more quickly, or they have to become much more spontaneous than they were in the past. And how do you know if you're actually going to be able to get this help? And what I'm in the process of setting up is an entirely new system where you will have access to these things. And when you need something, you go into my calendar, you book an appointment, which you can do now as well. But then you can actually say, and I want to buy this product. It'd be like, you know, going into a restaurant and buying a snack, or buying a whole dinner, or buying, you know, a 5-course meal, or whatever it is. You get to choose what you want, you order it, and we actually sit down and have the meeting and do whatever it is. It could be a 5-minute email. It could be a whole day seminar. It could be all different kinds of things, but people will have the options that they want to have, and know that I will be able to sit down and work with them on what's important for them.
That's fascinating that you're doing that, Rhonda, because the last 3 weeks, I don't have infrastructure set up the way you were describing, or even plan to set it up, but I've been really just creating, I've got like 4 programs running at the moment. And they're all for like different people, because I'm seeing that the needs are changing, and people's awareness is changing. So what I've always known, I don't know if you've ever heard the saying, sell people what they want, or then give them what they need, or something like that.
Right.
Well, for me, it's always been like, I've always known people would need this one aspect of what I teach, and I was reserving it to this specific group of people. Well, now I have my regular clients asking me for it. So now that becomes a new part of the menu, right? Like you were describing. So it's fascinating that you're doing that too. I just started doing it recently, and I'm like, yeah, that's pretty cool. That's neat. Now, if people do want to get a hold of you, where's the best place where they can connect with you?
Best thing is on LinkedIn. I have a team member who helps take care of everything on LinkedIn. So you get very, very quick responses from me as well. And as I said, there's also a place on there to book a call on my LinkedIn profile. So if you're interested, just go ahead, click on the link, and we'll set up an appointment on my calendar and make sure that we get a chance to speak. And as I said, I'm fascinated by people coming to me with new challenges. There's nothing worse in life than being bored. So even if I haven't mentioned anything today that specifically speaks to what you're looking at, but you think you would just need another perspective and you'd like a chance to talk to somebody who's been around the block and around the world a few times and maybe looks at things in a slightly different way than you do at the moment, I'd love to share some of my time with you and hopefully find some insights and what I call whisperation, where we first exchange wisdom and we use what we learn in the session then to go out and have the inspiration to do things. So it's a whisperation session.
Awesome. There's a link down below in the show notes. If you click on that, it'll bring you to Rhonda's profile. You'll see, looks like you got red hair on your profile picture.
Yeah. Don't get to the hairdresser as often as before with COVID either. It's not so red as it usually is. Yeah.
So if you want to message Rhonda there, connect with her, you can. Rhonda, one other thing before we get going. I promised I'd ask you this. So if you were to go back in time before you got into business and were to start over from scratch and do it again over with not what you know now, what would be three of the most powerful pieces of advice that you would give yourself?
Well, the first thing is don't let anybody tell you you can't do it. Because many years ago, I was asked to work for German television and national television. And I was working with English language things on TV in Germany. I was teaching all of Germany English, if you will. And people said to me, but Rhonda, you've never worked on TV. I said, no. But these people from the national broadcasting system seemed to think that I could do this. And I did it for 4 years. So I didn't learn anything about media, but I learned it all doing it. And had wonderful mentors and people working with me. So when somebody comes to you and they have something and you say, oh, but I don't have the background or I've never done a course or what? Yeah, if somebody believes in you, believe in yourself. That's the first.
Okay.
The second one is when you want to do something new, and especially if you're like me, you're a little older and you haven't done it this way, trust in the people who are doing it in a different way, the way you want to be doing it, but know that it won't all fit. I have people on my team now who could be my children or almost my grandchildren. They think totally differently. They live in a different sphere. I didn't grow up with a computer. I had none of this when I was young. But I've learned to trust them and make sure that the generation thing that everybody says, oh, the baby boomers, they don't understand. Well, I don't understand everything, but I do understand some things that other people haven't heard of either. Bring those things together. Make sure that everybody's learning from everybody because we all have so much we bring to the table and we got to get out of our little boxes, just like the people in the companies. We have to get out of our little silos and make sure that that works. And the third thing is when somebody tells you, oh, just do what I tell you, you don't need to be perfect. None of that ever works for me. So I take all of those wonderful things and I take the little nuggets out of them, the things that are really, really the gold in the mine for me, but then I build them together and make them in a way that works for me. So don't worry about if you try something from A to Z and it doesn't work the way they promised, in the program or whatever. Not everything has to work the way somebody promised you. It has to work the way that's best for you. And you have to be brave enough to just go out and keep trying until you get it right.
I love it. So believe in yourself, just to summarize, always be learning from others. Was that the second one?
Exactly.
Always be learning from others and then work the way that is best for you.
Exactly.
Awesome. If you want to connect with Rhonda again or message her on LinkedIn, link below in the show notes, click on that link, go to her profile and connect with her, reach out to her. Rhonda, thanks so much for being on the Meeting of the Masters.
Wonderful. Thanks for letting me be a master and work with you today, another master. Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed today's guest interview and you want us to watch more interviews like this, please subscribe to our YouTube channel at the link down below. Thanks for watching. My name's Steve, host of the Media Masters. We'll talk to you next time.